Welcome to BAM Adventures. Today we take a step back in time 7 years ago to my very first cruise out of Seattle on the Ruby Princess on the Inside Passage to Alaska. Having never been on a cruise before, I still remember that very first sight of the Ruby Princess. I remember thinking of just how massive it was and incredible that a ship of that size could float. Of course, now we know that there are many, many larger ships out there, but at the time, this was something that really blew me away. Now, seeing as it's been 7 years, I don't remember how long we had to wait to get to our room, but I do remember that first sight as we went out on our balcony on the Ruby Princess, looking across the dock to the Holland America ship docked next to us, out at the blue waters of the Seattle Sound. It was pretty cool. The balcony was a little bit small, but pretty normal for what you get most of the time. The room wasn't huge, but it was nice, and we'll talk about how incredible the bed on Princess cruises are. We just cannot rave enough about that. But we really just enjoyed the scenery. Having Mount Rainier in the background, it was a breathtaking experience from start to finish. So we flew up to Seattle the night before. It was pretty late. We didn't get into the hotel until almost midnight. We had a lot of trouble actually finding somewhere to eat at that time as we were flying all the way from DFW. So it was a pretty long flight and we were pretty hungry and didn't know anything about the city. Neither of us had been there before. So getting on the ship the next day, it was really kind of our first time to actually get to see the city and see how beautiful it was. It's a really nice city. A little overpriced, and that was 7 years ago, so I don't even want to think about what it is now. Everything seemed very pricey. Going back to the ship was just really, really pretty. Everything about the Princess ships is really done elegantly and kind of that classic old school feel. Of course, at the time, I didn't have anything to compare it to, but now that I know a bit more about other cruise ships, Princess has a really unique style that is very unique to them, and it was really nice. I do want to mention at this point that this was 7 years ago, and it was way before any thoughts of a YouTube channel or becoming cruise vloggers or a travel agent ever entered my mind or Ashley's mind. And so these are just pictures that we had. We don't really have many videos. We have one from our whale watching, which you'll see a little bit later on. But just so you know, we're cobbling together with pictures that we took 7 years ago, just to give an idea of what our experience was like. Now, as we left the port, we quickly found out on I believe it's called the Strait of Juan de Fuca, that it gets pretty cold when that wind gets blowing, and that wind blows pretty hard down that strait there. So even parts of the top of the ship were closed off to people as we sailed down the strait that night, and it got pretty cold. This was late July that we went on this, last week of July actually, but it was still pretty cold overall, and we probably did not prepare adequately with the clothing we brought, so we actually had to stop and get some extra coats and everything when we got to our first stop in Ketchikan. But this first night, we just explored the ship. We got to see a little bit of what all it had to offer, had a couple of drinks, and just enjoyed ourselves. If you have watched any of our Norwegian Breakaway cruise series, you will know that I am a huge fan of the view from the aft of the ship, and this is the moment where that began. As we were exploring the ship, we went to the back, And as I stood there, as Ashley stood there, we both said to each other, we need to find a balcony that is at the aft of the ship sometime in the future, because we were just blown away by everything about that part of the ship, the views from it. And as you know, on our next cruise on the Norwegian Breakaway, that's exactly what we did. Now, one huge difference between our Norwegian cruise and the cruise on the Ruby Princess was the dining attire. Now, it's been 7 years. I don't exactly remember how often we had formal nights on the Ruby Princess, but I do know that I had to bring a suit jacket for that one. That at one point I got turned away because I guess I was wearing shorts and it wasn't allowed. So that is something to keep in mind if you're sailing with some of the more classic cruise ships like Holland America or Princess, that you need to make sure you bring the proper attire for that. We were obviously new to cruising at this point, and I brought the clothes I needed. I just didn't realize how often I was going to need them. Now, the thing that Ashley was the most excited about was whale watching and seeing whales. Little did we know that on our very first sea day from our balcony, we would spot quite a few. Now, they were off in the distance, but we saw a lot of wildlife just on our first sea day. That's something that's a little bit different than the experience you get on a Caribbean cruise, I think. We didn't really see much at all when we went to the Caribbean on NCL. But in Alaska, they are all around you, and you can see them if you just stay out on the balcony for a little bit. It was pretty cool. By the way, if you're going to Alaska in late July, August, that time of year, be prepared. These pictures are from about 10 o'clock at night. So you only get about 4 hours of darkness. Our first stop on this cruise was the port of Ketchikan. So it was a really cool sail up. I remember seeing all these islands that we were going in between for the first time, and it was a very new experience to us, but a really, really cool one. So Ketchikan was the only port stop on this cruise that Ashley and I did not have an excursion planned. It was our first one. We thought it'd be good to just kind of get out and explore the town and kind of work our way into it. We were woken pretty early in the morning by these seaplanes that I guess have a runway right next to where you dock your ship. When we got out onto the port deck and we began to explore, we were blown away by all the ships in the harbor. We came across the Aleutian Ballad, which I guess was on Deadliest Catch at one point, which we were both fans of Deadliest Catch, so we thought that was pretty cool. Took a couple pictures with that in the background. Although we were kind of blown away by how small it was considering it's a crab ship for the Bering Sea. But we just kind of explored and enjoyed our stop in Ketchikan. We also did some shopping there to get some extra jackets and so forth to try to be ready for the rest of the cruise, which was going to be a lot colder than we were expecting. This first stop in Ketchikan would become an omen for our cruise, as we ended up getting rained on in pretty much every port stop we had. It was kind of weird because when we were traversing the inside passage on the ship, we actually didn't get much rain. But as soon as we would dock and get to an excursion or something, it seemed we were always getting drenched with rain. So we got some extra umbrellas that had the Alaska flag on them, and we still own those to this day, actually. But after our stop in Ketchikan, after exploring a little bit, we went back and we just watched the seaplanes fly off of our balcony and enjoyed the scenery of this great, beautiful location. So really, you're going to find two main itineraries when you go on an Alaskan cruise, either a glacier-based stop or you may find an Endicott Arm or Tracy Arm Fjord stop. This one did not include Glacier Bay. We were scheduled to go to Tracy Arm Fjord as kind of the highlight of the cruise and sail through that. But when we got there, we found, or the captain of the ship, of course, found that there were just too many icebergs to get into the Tracy Arm Fjord. So I guess this happens quite often, as they were prepared to go into Endicott Fjord instead. So we sailed into Endicott Fjord and were immediately blown away by the blue icebergs that were just everywhere. The water was just beautiful, the scenery was gorgeous, but it was really cold. This is about 4 a.m. that we start into the fjord, and you can see, talking about the light, you can see how early the sun rose there that far north. But it was very, very cold. But we did have a balcony specifically for this moment, so that we had breakfast on the balcony. We watched as we went into the fjord. We saw some seals that were resting on some of the icebergs as we passed by. But this is definitely a morning that I will never forget, as it was absolutely breathtaking. The sail up the fjord was absolutely stunning, and it just took our breath away. But then we got to this site, and when you see the glacier for the first time, it just totally stops you down and leaves you in awe. To see the blue color of the ice, then to see kind of the dirt that's mixed in with it, and realize that ice is carving out this valley that you're sailing down. It's really an awe-inspiring moment, and one I will never forget. As I mentioned earlier, as we got close to the glacier, we also had this little fella who made an appearance. It was pretty cool to see a seal just kind of resting, taking in the morning on an iceberg just right outside your balcony. But it's just incredible. The wildlife in Alaska, it just can't be beat. It's so different than any other cruise and any other destination, and it makes it really, really special. One thing I thought was really cool was as we got close to the glacier, we actually spent quite a bit of time with it. We did a full 360 so that every part of the ship had a view. We stopped down for a while because I guess some people had gotten an excursion and they got in little boats and went much closer to it. We have a picture of one of the small ships, although it's really not that small, but it just looks absolutely tiny in the distance there. I think it's coming up. That it just is tiny compared to the massive ice, and it kind of makes you realize that it's a lot larger of a structure than you realize when you're 14 levels up on your cruise ship and almost half a mile away or something. So that was kind of a real cool aspect to it. But we spent a lot of time there, which I really, really felt lucky to be able to do, because you never want to leave. It's just so beautiful. As we turned around and began to head back out the Endicott Arm Fjord, we really just took in all the waterfalls that were everywhere. It's incredible how many waterfalls there are in Alaska. So that was kind of the highlight of exiting. As we did that, we went to Juneau, which was our next stop, and we got to later that day. We will get that video up very shortly, so make sure you guys subscribe so that you don't miss it. And we sure do thank you for watching this one. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.